So good afternoon, and we're going to say thank you for your time today because we are talking about time management, benefits for your well-being, your performance, and everything that goes with it. And of course, I am joined by the beautiful, the fabulous, who's shared this morning with me. Brett, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Great, Liz. I've been really excited to come on your program for a long time. I love the work that you do in mind, body, and I think we share, maybe for different reasons. I'm not an ex-Olympian, but I certainly have my reasons for sharing a lot of the same values that you do. So I'm looking forward to a fruitful conversation.
It's always going to be fruitful. I love our engagements. Absolutely fabulous. Just checking. Yeah, I've just had my pop-ups to say I'm live over on LinkedIn. So guys, if you are joining us, it is Monday, pretty much everywhere, mainly around the world. So if you're not, maybe you're on Tuesday. If you are joining us, tuning in, dropping your comments, thoughts, and questions, because we're going to be sharing hopefully good value. But of course, we need to know how much it benefits you. So drop in anything that you want to add, you want to question us, and you've got two experts in their fields sitting right here. So use us without being rude. This is your time to get the best. And a good afternoon to Andreas, obviously the first one jumping in. And of course, connect. This is a great time to connect with like-minded, incredible individuals as well. So, time. What you missed, guys, was just before we came on screen, we were having a sort of conversation about whether time, wealth, or well-being was the most important thing in our lives. And both Brett and I were like going, oh, I've just knocked my pop screen. How well-being and time we could go back and forth, because if you've got time but you haven't got well-being, then of course you can't use your time wisely. But then if you've got the well-being but you've got no time in the world, then what are you doing?
Yeah, it really is, and it's we could probably spend all day debating it. But I think where you and I settled was that they're both really important, and we've got to get them, in the right spot. Because so Liz, I'm full disclosure here. I'm 59 years old, right? I worked in corporate life, living on airplanes and hotels for 30 years. Lived in Asia Pacific for most of that time. Lived in your country for a few years, and spent significant time in the Middle East and Africa. And so I've been all over the place. And one of the things that I learned after doing all of that about 7 years ago was the importance of the work that you do, actually, right? And fortunately, I would say that I was lucky, blessed, however you want to put it, during that time that I was jet setting around the world, that I did not develop any health issues, right, that impaired me. But boy, I was probably, now that I've had time to study, what you eat matters, how you sleep matters, how you take care of your mind and your body, right, the work that you do. It scares the daylights out of me, because I probably violated most of the principles of that over that 30-year period. And so for the past 7 years or so, since I've been out of the corporate environment, I've focused on mind and body and where I invest my time. That is my number one top priority, right? So I think you and I are coming from, you're an ex-Olympian. I'm not. Wish I were, because I really have a lot of respect for the what it takes to do what you've done before. And I think that really qualifies you for doing the work that you do. But while I'm not coming from that angle, I'm coming from a different angle, because I know there's a lot of people out there that do the types of work that I did, the jet setting work, and you're going to business dinners 3 nights a week. That you have to learn how to resist some of the temptations of local culture, such as excessive alcohol consumption, such as eating so many rubber chicken meals, every night, and things like that. That, we all know that corporate dinners are not, health is not the priority with a lot of those things. So I know there's a lot of people out there, to sum up, that can benefit from a lot of this in the
Mhm.
corporate space, which is where I'm coming from. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to have this chat with you about this as well.
Well, we're going to kick it off with a great
Yeah.
compliment. Said you don't look at age over 15.
Mm.
I was going to say 29 with 30 years experience. Throw that in.
Oh,
But
Brielle, yeah, Brielle's great. She is the at the forefront of Gen Z,
yeah.
and with one of the best. I believe that she's an elite performer, and there's two things that define performance that we control. One is
Mhm.
attitude, and the other is hard work. And Brielle's got
Mhm.
both of those, so that's awesome.
Well,
Thank you
it's
for the
fabulous to
compliment,
have
Brielle.
her tuning in. But when you were saying about you coming from this busy back, I obviously came from the other background. So
Mm-hmm.
we've basically come at things and we've sort of met in the middle and gone, this is important, because I was just doing the fitness, but I hadn't quite got it in the pieces to make it the performance with everything else. And I was like, that's sort of the whole package that we've sort of mentioned, because you say about the jet set and lifestyle, and of course you say about being lucky. I did speak to Professor Pete. So anyone doesn't know Professor Pete, he's an amazing person who talks about stress, but he had a corporate job and he ended up with stress-induced diabetes. So I've obviously done a interview with him and he shared the story. But some aren't that lucky, as in you don't get out alive. Some,
Right.
it's not just about what you do now, because it's also about how much you age. It's about what your body gets pushed through, and because of the stress we put on our bodies when we're younger and we are professional adults, that affects our time later.
Yeah, and it also, we all know, unfortunately, that at some point something's going to happen to us. We're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, so the question I asked myself 7 years ago, right? And my wife as well, it's the same. Fortunately, she came through all of that period, not working, but basically helping. It was a team effort, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
she managed a lot of the household while we were moving around the world and all of that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
we both emerged from it okay. But at some point, we're all going to get stricken with some problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, do you want to do everything you can now while you're healthy to be able to absorb whatever shock that is? Because it will happen. Or do you want to just kind of, enjoy life day by day? And then when you get hit with something, if you have an immune problem or some sort of issue there, don't you want to be able to say to yourself, I've done everything I can. Things happen in this world. God made this happen. It's destined to happen. So are you in a better position to deal with it or not? And that's really my mindset with this is that I'm want to be in, I'm not going to enter the Olympics, but I'm entering the Olympics of life, maybe, right? So that I'm going to, if I do get struck by any of this stuff, I'm going to get through it.
Well, one question I'll ask you, because this is something I've come across a lot. Did you ever feel the attitude or the thought that it won't happen to me, I can push through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For 3 decades. Invincible. It can't, it's not, that happens to other people. It's not going to happen to me. My family history has a history of cardiovascular issues. So it's in the genetics. So even kind of knowing that, but not really paying a lot of attention to it all. I took pretty good care of myself. Last 2 years of university, I was on a tennis scholarship. Been healthy from day one. And kind of took care of myself. But then I got in the corporate world and I kind of said, you know what? I was healthy when I was really young, so I'll be fine with it this way. And I had no idea, by the way, at the time. I had planned, and my wife and I had planned, we would retire at 65. We wound up retiring at 52, financially independent, right? And that was fine. It was ahead of schedule. And it's because we live frugally and we don't do a lot of excessive things. So, but because of that, Liz, that has created even more runway on what's left kind of in our lives as well. Because I have no intention at all about going back to corporate life. Kind of done that, and where else would I live? Maybe Latin America. That would be great. That's probably the only major continent I haven't lived and worked in, but don't need to really do that anymore, And so I think that that's why kind of the mind and body, I'll just kind of use your brand on it this way, has become a big priority with me, because I'd like to live to be 100 healthy. I don't want to live to be 100 unhealthy. And I'm fighting some genetics that I was born with in the family. My GP, she always tells me, Brett, you can control what you can control, but we can't control our genetics, right? So these are the things, but this is what you can control. And so I really focus. It's like I spoke about with Brielle a while ago, hard work. If you want to perform, it's hard work and attitude. If you want to take care of yourself, right, you've got the genetics, you can't change it. So you have to overcompensate that way. So I'm trying to fight the tomb of time. That's my attitude.
I want to dive into something you've said there about retirement, because there are, in the UK, there's a lot of changes about retirement age and pensions and all this sort of thing. So people sort of my age, maybe a bit younger, obviously we're planning ahead, because we're seeing, say, the retirement age for state pensions going up, right? So obviously we're maybe likely there's a huge proportion of people who are having to work longer. So we've got two elements on the retirement thing. One is obviously, as you've done, financially stable. I've got this long period of time that I really want to enjoy. You don't want to spend 50 years like just sat in a chair because you can't do anything. It's the same as those who are having to work later because they're not as well paid or whatever. And they want the energy, and then they want to still enjoy retirement, because no one wants to get there and just end up in the chair.
That's right. A lot of people don't think of that, right? They think, oh, I'm going to retire, but they don't think about what they're going to do after that. Now, so I'll tell you a little bit more about my story and what really what triggered that 52, right? And because we had planned on 65. Well, what happened was that we were in Singapore for the third time, and a year in, I was working for an Australian New Zealand bank, ANZ Bank, and so flying up and down Asia again, running their wealth business. So what happened a year before I left that assignment, my wife had come back to the U.S. to take care of her dad, who was getting, he wasn't doing well, and he was in his 90s, right? So very good genetics on that side, but he wasn't doing well. So she came back to care for him. So for the final year in Singapore, and then the company that I worked for had a reorganization, and the first person to go was my boss. The second person to go was me, because they were eliminating that division. And so we had a discussion and said, do we want to, look for jobs down in Australia, or what do we want to do? And we say, you know what, it's time to come back. We just kind of knew it. So we came back. I came back to join her, and we I did laundry for 6 years. I did laundry, hand washed dishes, and prepared 2 of the 3 meals a day for that household. And we took care of our parents. And so what that did, Liz, in the beginning, the first 6 to 12 months of that, doing that, going from living in hotels and airplanes, board meeting rooms, all of that stuff, to doing laundry and hand washing dishes, my body was okay. It was the same. Nothing really changed there. Okay. But I started to develop, for the first time in my life, some uneasiness in my mind about what am I doing here? I was fine doing it. I wanted to do it. We wanted to do it, right? But my mind went through a shock of being fully engaged and worried about, on a daily basis, about risk, about people, about profit objectives, all of this stuff, into all of a sudden domestic chores, right? It was a big, and so I tried different things and failed at it to get out of it. So I read, and to this day, I read 5 newspapers a day, right? I consume it with, I've got a cap on media. Maybe we can talk about that, because that is a big part of how to take care of your mental health, is to limit your consumption of media. But anyway, I read the 5 newspapers a day from around the world so I could kind of stay in tune. I kind of wanted to keep my foot back in the door in the wealth management and international banking arena. So I would read a lot of stuff about that in places, Singapore, Australia, the UK, Africa, the Middle East. And so this is where I consume my media. So, but it wasn't enough. And then a year went by, and then another year went by, and I found that I was kind of, not a little bit fading away. Like, what is going on here? My body was fine. So I started to work out, started to exercise a bit, and that was good. It felt good. But after the shower, it didn't feel so great. And it was the mental part. So I finally realized it's the mental part. So then what I started to do is to say, okay, this consumption isn't enough. I need to, in addition to read, I need to write. And part of writing led to a lot of the work that I do now, which is to help people under one of the unique skills that I developed over the 30 years, Liz, was how to clean up, navigate, and perform under crisis. I went through the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s, went through the aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy. I was in Japan for 6 years. And then the global financial crisis, I was in your neck of the woods in the UK, in the Middle East and Africa. And so I developed a unique, not by design, by crisis, set of skills that now, okay, I can share this with people. And, I've got 30 years of journals and books where I kept a daily journal. And so my posts on LinkedIn, for example, are all real, genuine experiences that I personally either initiated or personally was in the room to witness. And that stuff I share is from these books. There's 89 books that I kept since 1988. And so then I found that solved the mental, that gap process, back to your original question. So, but it took me over 2 years to do that. And so my lesson learned from that with everybody is, don't think you're going to retire. I'm getting back to your question now, but I think this context is important because I went through it. Is to don't just think you're going to retire. What in the world are you going to do when you retire? Not just with your body. It's not about going to the gym. You got to do that, right? But go back to your brand here. And this is not a promotion for your brand, but I went through it. You've got what's your game plan for your mind as well. Okay. And how your brain is a muscle, right? So how are you going to maintain that muscle of your mind? It's not just physical. It's both. You can't ignore the physical, but you got to, for me, it was actually not just reading and consuming stuff. It was actually writing stuff and kind of creating, however you want to call it. Does that answer your question in context?
It does. And I'm trying to hold on to the thought, because I'm just going to do a quick catch with everyone because their comments are shooting in. So obviously,
good.
There's some love coming back. But of course, we've got Will's jumping in, the king of kindness.
Will.
Mr. Sunshine, as I like to call him. So he's all jumping in. And of course, failing is important for learning. Absolutely. But of course, there's some resonating words coming from you yourself, Brett. So people are connecting with this, which is amazing, because you said about my brand being mind body, but when I came up with the name, it was because I realized it was more than just a workout. And COVID's been a blessing for me, because I've had this chance to work on different things, because even though I've come from it the opposite way, we spend our working lives working. We test our brain, we run around with our bodies, we think all the time. There's always something we have to do. Think about it when you have a holiday and you've got a staycation like we had with COVID. It's well, what do I do?
Right.
And it's like we're going to come on to some tips, guys. So if you are still with us, please stay tuned, because we're going to go through some advice on how to keep the brain and the body so we can transfer from whether it is from working to not working, or any transition in life, to obviously maximize time. But the one example that I was going to give is I've restricted myself on a Sunday. So I disconnect from computers and this, and I go, okay, I've got to do something. So the worst Sunday I've had was actually yesterday because it was hot. And I said, I'm not going out, because I went out first thing, went out for a walk in the morning, went to the gym, all done. Had a great workout, came back, and I was like, okay, it's hot. Then we did have a thunderstorm. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere because I want to stay as cool as possible. So the best place is indoors with the blinds and everything shut. Okay, UK, we're not designed for high heat. But actually, to try and find something to do where I wasn't going to make myself hotter, it was testing my brain, my creativity, and trying to keep active rather than just switching on a device, which gets really, really easy. But it doesn't actually stimulate our brain. So that's where I wanted to lead on to, because obviously a device, a game, okay, it might distract our mind, but it doesn't stimulate. So let's get into the tip about stimulating the brain, because when we wind down, when we realize we're not being told all this externals, what you need to do, like clients or business, boss, bills, the stress of life. Even when we have the stress of life, how do we manage our time to take care of our brain in such a way that we can obviously boost our performance? So we're going to stay with the retirement. So let's look at retirement to begin with, then we'll bring it back into the professional. Okay. So what you've said, one, it's you found reading and writing were really beneficial for stimulating your brain.
Yeah, reading and writing, but kind of going beyond that, right? So let's give let's issue the first practical tips of the day to those that are investing your time with us as well. And Liz and I both appreciate all of you tuning in, because we know that you could be doing something else with this time. And so both she and I would love for you to be able to walk away on a Monday morning with saying, wow, I learned something that I can do right away. That's both our mission. And you should watch Liz's show, because she can tell you I've done that with her. Okay. So my first principle of the day that's really practical is that Monday through Friday, I don't turn on the TV to watch news. It doesn't come from that source as well. It is my consumption. So it's limiting tip number one, limit your consumption of media, because one, you don't control it. Somebody else is reporting it. It's full of hypocrisy, regardless of your media source. They're all full of hypocrisy, because what is journalism? Journalism, okay, you can debate what it is, but it is somebody reporting on something, and then it gets mixed up between opinion and news and politics and all this other stuff. So it's not healthy for the muscle in the brain. It's kind of like eating sugar with your body. It's poison.
Yeah.
Right.
I can give because these fires have been in Canada. I would literally, I mean, what I tend to do with my news. So guys, here's my sort of thing. I actually skim headlines, and that's about it. That's my lot. Because reading is not to me enjoyable, but also I'm going, it's one story to another. Or if I read a story, I'll read like The Sun, which is like a tabloid. Then I'll read like the Telegraph version of it, the same story. So I'll read the opposites. But I was scrolling through, and I'm literally scrolling. There was nothing about the fires. It was actually a friend of mine who lives in New York who sent it to me. And I was like, oh my God, he said, this is how we're looking right now. And there was nothing that was coming up in my headlines at all about this. I mean, if I delved into it and gone through the websites and dug into the world, then I would have found it. But the fact that we weren't getting that in our headlines, we were getting other rubbish about Love Island.
Perfect example, because it doesn't fit their narrative to put it in the headlines, but that's a different matter. But you're right about that, Liz. So you found out more from engaging with your friend than you did from that time supposedly consuming news. So the lesson number one, so what Brett Packard does, you can set your own cap, but I put a cap because I need to stay in touch with my clients. I need to know what's going on globally. So I spend 1 hour per day, and I have 5 media sources strategically placed around the world, where I know pretty much what's going on in all the major parts of the world. So cap your media. Don't use the telly to do it, okay? Because that leads to another thing as well. So either use a computer, use your phone, and focus, okay? Get it done right before this program. So I get up every day. We could talk about routines later if you want, but I get up at 5 every day, 5 my time on the West Coast, and I spend an hour with first cup of coffee focused on consuming this media. So I get it out of the way, and then I don't do it again for 24 hours, right? That's just what it is, right? And I make notes. Some things I share with other people because I think they might find it interesting. So I just make a note and I'll do that later in the day. But consume it and cap it, okay? But don't get it from the television. I love sports. I'm a sports fanatic, big time. But during the work week, if it's in prime time, I'll watch the event. But if it's during the day, I just don't turn on the television. My office here, I'm such a sports fanatic. I can get up to 30 simultaneous live sporting events right here in this room that I'm in, because I've got this set up here, and with technology, it is awesome. So on Saturdays during football season, I've got this like a casino. It's
place
awesome.
is the place to be.
I love it. Yeah, my place is the place to be. It's great. So that's kind of a hobby that I have. But during the week, none of them go on, right? So it's just one of those things that I've said, because it's like eating sugar. It is, or it's eating. Let me put it to you this way. I don't know how many people know this. Hopefully, a lot do. If you eat white rice, it's pure sugar when it hits your stomach. So don't do it. Right? If you want to live longer, don't eat white rice, but you eat all the brown rice that you want to. Right? Go ahead, Liz. You're laughing at that.
Yeah, I'm not. Let's stay off nutrition.
Okay.
There are some values.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Anyway.
If you're looking at
we all tailor it our own way, but anyway, I don't eat white rice. I eat quinoa and brown rice. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you go for better choices, those are the two. But if you look at the Japanese way of living and how they used to eat the rice and everything, it shouldn't be feared as such. So although there's better options, I'll agree with that statement.
It's good you bring that up. I lived in Japan 6 years. You're right, Liz, about that. And Japanese rice is a different kind of rice than the common staple rice pretty much everywhere else in the world. It's more of a sticky. So and I agree. So anyway,
it's the type
probably
of
a bad example.
Well, okay, cheap, bog standard shelf white rice.
Yeah.
That's the one we want.
I'm with you.
See, there we go. We had our nutrition.
Hey, you're the expert. Yeah. So.
So you actually said 2 points there. So one's obviously about the news and the news media, but you said something which is a skill that I actually used when I was moving house. When you were, you said you consume it for a period of time, and then that's your time, and then you go to the next day. I did the same thing about when I was looking for a new place, because a year ago, markets are busy. There's a lot of demand for one place. So I would do 10 to 15 minutes a day, check 3 websites, click off. I wouldn't do it until the next day. And I actually found, because I detached from it slightly, it was like, actually, I found something a lot quicker. The first thing I viewed, I got. Whereas the year before, I was always on there, and my mentality was, there's nothing out there. I can't find anything. This is so hard. And actually, I was getting more stressed because my mind was just involved in that action. So the reason I said you've done 2 there is because you've said about the news source, but it's the time management of, say, these tasks, or reading news, or maybe doing your bills, tax returns.
It is. Yeah. So thanks for raising this, Liz. And sometimes I get caught down one pathway and I need to be brought back. Anybody that's ever worked with me, they know that. And so, but you raise a really good point. So I talked about consumption of media. Let me summarize it in a better way. And media is only part of that umbrella. It's important that we learn how to detect and identify the distractors from
Mm-hmm.
living our best life. Okay. Media is one of those. I should have said it that way, but you're right about that. So media,
That's
if
a
you view
beautiful
it
way to
as an
put it.
umbrella, media's one, television's
Yeah.
another. I'm in the midst of doing I don't know how long I'll do it. It may go for the rest of the year, but hypocrisy is another one. Battery drainer people that are naysayers, that are skeptics. These are the kinds of things that you need to learn. You have to learn how to detect it, because some of them operate in stealth mode where they're doing it to you and you don't know that they're basically screwing you, for lack of a better word, until later. But eventually you'll find out. So you have to learn how to detect it. And then you have to learn how to manage it and get them out of your life. Liz, a lot of it is, I grew up in the radio era in the 1970s. Radio was big. Sure, we had television, but radio was really a big thing. And these are the old-fashioned radios. There was no computers, no internet. And static on a radio station is one of the most annoying things that you could ever deal with. You're trying to hear a song or something and you got this static coming through, and it is so annoying. So this is, to me, what hypocrites are. They're static, like a mosquito, right? You can do something, you can swat them away, get them away, but mosquitoes carry the number one cause of death in many African countries, malaria. Okay, so this little insect, right? So you've got to get these things off of your skin, out of your life. So you're right about that. Media, not taking care of yourself. These are distractors from living your best life.
You did make me laugh though when you said about the static, because I remember the old internet dial-up. Yeah. And how you sit there and your dial up and you go,
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And all that. And you'll be there for, sometimes it wouldn't connect, then you'd have to do it again. You might be 5 times, and then after about 10 minutes might knock off and you've got to connect again.
Yeah. Steve Jobs really did change the world, huh? Yeah. So I used to, it's funny you mentioned that. I even got to the point where, because I was traveling, and back during that time, where there was a way you could do it from a payphone, and boy, was that difficult. The old-fashioned payphone. Yeah. But anyway, dial-up internet. We don't need to worry about that anymore. Yeah.
Hypocrites that are like a rock in your shoe. So yeah, distractions.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah.
But we've mentioned a few times devices, because and the reason I want to raise devices now, because obviously it kind of connects, is because of blue light and brain stimulation. How much do you know about that?
I know enough about, not as much as you, but I know enough about it. These are my reading blue light glasses. Okay. So I know enough about it to know to avoid it in the evening. Okay. Or to, if I'm going to consume something in the evening, then I'll make sure that I have something with blue light. These glasses that I have, right, my vision is awful. So these are the corrective lenses. Those are reading glasses I use with my contact lenses. So, and that's where the blue light is, because I wear that most of the time. So I know enough about that, but let me talk generally about devices. So devices are to me, again, 1970s grew up, they're a library. So my device is a library, and it's a place that I go to, not just, I don't go there to just consume stuff, but I go there to learn something too. Right now, I'm spending an hour of my social time with you, and that will be an hour less that I give to my social time. I know we'll get into time management later, but later in the day, because I'm doing an hour for you, because this is going to be hopefully a gain to other people. And so to me, it's like going to the library, where you can network, you can study microfiche from history, you can read a book, you can find books in the future to read, you can plan your day, you can see where is your progress for your goals. So I'm an expert on these devices, but that's how I use them. I don't get on Instagram. I don't even have a TikTok account because I don't trust it. But I don't spend time just scrolling through. I do on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn to me is the ultimate library. But I don't use my phone as a social media type of, thing, because that's toxic.
Well, I'm kind of similar, but for example, I'm on LinkedIn and I will check my DMs. I don't
Mm-hmm.
tend to do on my phone. Occasionally, I might do the odd thing if I'm walking or something. But
Yep.
this is why people send me voice notes. Unless I'm set up to record, I don't have audio set up on my computer. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that later, thinking I'll do it when I'm thinking, and I completely forget. So anyone sends me audio messages, I might miss them. So,
Yeah,
but
and everybody's different, right? So I'm not a big voice notes person, but I can tell you that some of the different generations are,
mm,
and so I embrace that, and it's
mm,
like cool. It's cool with me, because
yeah,
I know they have a good reason for doing that, and
mm,
but with me, I'm a dinosaur, so I'm an email type of person. I'm not a text fanatic, but I enjoy texting if
mm,
it's over a good topic, or I enjoy talking if it's over a good topic, or a video like we're doing now.
mm,
I personally think this topic is a much
mm,
better, to look at the humans,
mm,
so that you can kind of look at Brett, look at Liz, and say, okay, are they, because I use the authenticity test. And then I really don't care how people communicate with me. If they're authentic, and they're not a fake, they're not a hypocrite, then any way that they would prefer to engage with me, I'm like cool with that. But I agree with you. I mean, I think it's all a matter of our own preference, right? So I don't get
mm.
hung up in all that stuff as well.
It's just when it's the reason I say it's because this is how we set boundaries, and I have to say the
Yeah.
more I've set my boundaries, which we will come
Hmm.
into, I've actually got off my phone for using LinkedIn, and I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, my work time involves LinkedIn time.
Hmm.
And at one point, I had realized, because when COVID hit, I wasn't working that much at the beginning because all my clients were off, centers were
Hmm.
shut. There was one point I went from having this huge busy diary to nothing. So, of
Wow.
course, it was great because I spent more time. Then after a while, it got to the point I was getting a little busier, but I still had a lot of time. And I'm like going, I'm at home, my housemate's working. What do? I'll connect. Like you said, use the library. Let's connect with people. Let's do this. Let's find stuff out. Let's do network. And it was
Hmm.
great fun. But then I realized it was becoming too much. Like I was not
Hmm.
letting go. I was not saying focus and then letting go. And then so I went, okay, I need to go cold turkey for a bit and cut off to realize exactly so I could step back.
Yep.
So let's talk about before we get into the time boundaries, because obviously we're going to talk about stepping back thing, because you did it when you retired. Okay, you had this busy job and all this, then all of a sudden it's like boom, right, which is
Right.
making you step back and go, wow, what wasn't I doing?
Hmm.
How did you find yourself, what was the process you sort of went to review yourself, your life, to reconnect to the things that you enjoyed doing so you could feel mentally cared for?
It's a great question. And so back in 1980, I don't know, 84, 85, something like that. I had gone to 2 years of junior college, way back then. And then it was time to go to the big university. So I went there, and some people that know me know this story, but in short, I lasted 10 days and
Mm,
I dropped out. Couldn't take it. I was, never lived away from home, and the 2 years in junior college, I commuted from home and all this stuff, and couldn't take it. So I went back, and for 6 months, my dreams were shattered. And I was a young kid, so there's no maturity here, right? So I kind of got my act together and started reading some books, and I learned something way back then in the mid 80s about adversity quotient. And what I learned, Liz, without having the university degree, was that the value of AQ, at least guiding me through all of these years now in the year 2023, AQ has turned out to be the single most uh, effective tool in dealing with the real world and being
mm,
successful. And that a lot of people talk about IQ and I don't even know what my IQ is, but and then they talk about EQ. That's really important as well.
Mhm.
But I'm an AQ expert, and so I learned back then that dealing with adversity. And here's a lesson for everybody today: to build an AQ, you've got to do three things. One is shit's going to happen. So when it happens, okay, you don't blame yourself for it. There are so many people that regardless of what happens, because media and society in general are what they love for you to blame yourself. Don't do it.
Mhm.
Resist it. Number
Mhm.
two, to build a strong AQ, don't blame other people. Don't blame your fellow humans. They might be to blame, okay, but don't
Mhm.
blame them, because there's just no future in that as well. And then number three, understand that whatever it is, in the case that you mentioned, it's COVID, right? A big
Mhm.
shock to the system. It is limited in scope and duration, and it shall pass. Okay, so if you keep those perspectives, there's a little bit more to it than that, but you keep those
Mhm.
perspectives and focus on having a strong AQ, you're going to go
Mhm.
really far in life. So back to your question, I had learned that, fortunately, dropping out of school when I was a kid, and then I got my act back together. I went back, got my degree, and then it was time to apply for jobs. So this is in 1987. Okay, that's when I graduated. Liz, I applied at 24 places, got 24 declines. And that was just devastating. So here I finally go get my degree after going through all this, 24 declines. But I kept going. And it was because of the
Mhm.
AQ, what I had learned a few years prior to that. And so when these crises hit later in Asia and other places, that this AQ was a guiding principle in leading very large thousands of people, right? As well. It's a very powerful tool. So back to your question, when I retired and when I went through this as well, I have already conditioned myself. So I do have a strong AQ. So I'm going to dig myself out of this, because I acknowledge there's a problem here. And my problem is, what am I going to do with my time? Right. And
Mhm.
so I was able to, because of a strong AQ, try different things, right? Started reading the five newspapers, started to fine tune
Mhm.
that. And then eventually I kind of said, okay, I'm consuming. Maybe I need to like not consume so much, and start to create, or start to do things where I can help tens of thousands of people,
Mhm.
just like I helped tens of thousands of people before.
Mhm.
And so it was through, I think, the adversity quotient and my attitude to dig myself out of what I recognized was a hole.
Mhm. You mentioned something beautiful there about flow, because you were consuming, but there was no outlay. So everything is like this yin and yang, this flow of energy. What we get in, we have to give out. So it's like if you go to the gym, obviously you work hard. Of course, you need to put food in you to go to the gym and work hard. Or like you need water. It's something that's got a balance. And so what you've said there is very why it's always something. Okay, I might be wanting to take this in and learn this, but I've got to use it in such a way that means I can feel like I give something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mine's much smaller, but I actually started doing macrame, so the knots,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted something to do. This was me filling my
Yeah.
Sundays when I
Awesome. Yeah.
had
We all have to
things to
find our
do,
own way. Yeah.
and I even tried crochet. So the macrame, I was like, cool, because then I made some. I made some for my nan. My nan's loving it. She's 99, loves it. It's in a window. Um, but then I started crochet because my mum could knit, and as a kid I crocheted, but I'm really, really, really,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot say how bad I am. So I was following the instructions. So I thought this will be fine. I can learn. I'm not going to be great, but I can learn something. I can do a line. I went to turn it around, follow the instructions step by step, and I kept going in a further longer line, and then I kept
Yeah.
going, and then I undid it and tried again, and I can make a very good chain. So I realized this is not for me, because I'm able to take it in, but I can't bring it out. And it
I
was
see.
actually
Right.
stressing me out.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? And we all
Yeah.
have to find our way, right? So,
Yeah.
I've in this meeting that you and I are sharing now with the world, I shared my story. You just shared part of your story as well. We all have to find our way. But here's the point, folks. You got to find your way. You got to do something. You got to have a strong AQ, right? And you're going to find your way. You got to stay focused. You got to eliminate those mosquitoes, that static from the radio, whatever it is. Because if you can eliminate distractions, you'll achieve whatever you want to achieve, right? Because it's those distractions that get in our way, those constant, and it's okay to be interrupted. I don't mind. Hey, I've got people in my circle, Liz, they can interrupt me, whatever I'm doing, if they can get me, right? Because I do put do not disturb on a lot, like right now. So nobody can get me right now. Everything is shut down. They're going to get an auto reply, right? But at the end of the day, I will make all the time in the world for these legitimate, people, but the illegitimate people, there's no time for them.
Well, we've got a lot of love. Before we get onto the time management, so we'll close on the time. Obviously, Lisa's jumped in. Obviously, great topic. Most of the media detracts from living within, and that's quite a valuable point. Sometimes we look on the external so much for the fix. That's a whole nother topic. We'll look at outside rather than coming within us. So obviously have a choice. But Rachel has joined us this morning. Good morning,
Rachel. Good morning, my dear friend.
Absolutely filled with love. And of course, sharing is empowering. So finding purpose. So yes, finding purpose is very, very essential. I mean, there's more love coming. There's more love. Don't think I keep everything up. Everyone's so active. I love it. You've all had your Weetabix this morning. So let's close with about the time management, because like we said, we want to make sure people feel there's value here. So if you haven't quite got anything, please do stay, guys, because we want to talk about managing your time so it works effectively for you and what you want to achieve. So what would you say with that one, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, that was the promise we made when people decided to tune in here. So I kind of view it this way. Again, it's old fashioned, but the old fashioned hourglass, right? Where you've got the sand in the hourglass and you turn it upside down and start applying physics to that. Only one grain of sand at a time can flow through that hourglass. That's reality. As much as we'd like to say there's a shortcut, etc. So my number one principle with time management, Liz, is it's very simple. It's everything I do in life is through a long-term lens, playing the long game. Okay, this instant gratification, this short-term shortcut, type of approach and everything, because that is the guiding principle I use with my time. So we haven't talked a lot about physical health here and diet and all that. It's different topic for a different day. People can follow you for that stuff. But time management, my guiding principle, everything is through a long-term lens. Your relationships, who you surround yourself with, can they stand the test of time, right? Because time reveals all eventually, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah, it does.
So if we're talking about time management, so put a lens on it of long term. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, 8 hours of sleep. And again, I didn't do this. My corporate life, 30 years, 30 countries, all over the world, airplanes, hotels, 4 hours of sleep a night. Oftentimes here's a common thing. I would often, very common for years, my hotel was a Singapore Airlines flight from Singapore to Tokyo. It landed at 7:00 in the morning. I rushed off to the hotel, took a shower, put on a suit and tie, and was in the office by 10:00, right? So, and when you add it up, it's probably 3.5 hours of sleep on that 7-hour overnight flight. And not just once, but a lot. Okay. So, but now get your 8 hours of sleep. There's all kinds of studies that prove that. I'm not going to get into those right now. All right. But there's no reason not to. So that leaves 16 hours, right? That leaves 16 hours there, unless you live on Jupiter, there's 24 hours in a day. Okay.
Mhm.
So with that 16 hours, what I do, it never works out perfectly, Liz, but what I do is I then chop that 16, I just split it in two, like cutting an
Mhm.
apple down the middle. And
Mhm.
then I've got 8 and 8. Okay. So that 8 is for your work, for your development, and hopefully more personal development
Mhm.
than work. So even if you have a full-time job, okay, in that job, you can develop yourself in that job. And
Mhm.
using Jim Rohn, who is Tony Robbins' mentor, okay, one thing he always said, I went to see him back in 1988. Okay, one thing Jim Rohn always said: work harder on yourself than you do on your
Mhm.
job. And when I started doing, and I did that throughout my career, and you've heard the success here, 52 years old, right? So it worked really well when that happened. So you work hard. So for that 8 hours is your work. That other 8 hours, Liz, is your it. You can do with it what you want. You can take a
Mhm.
nap. You can eat potato chips and sit on the couch. You can drink soda pop. You can do all these things to destroy your life, right? I don't eat any of those things, by the way. And I've got a sofa behind me, but I don't hardly ever sit on it unless I'm watching those sports. But this other 8 hours, what are you going to do? Okay, you need to do so. What I do something physically. And your
Mhm.
post this morning, you posted an hour or two or three or four before this one,
Mhm.
was excellent because it had some good principles there. You can go to the gym, or you can, do. The point is, you've got need to do something, right?
Mhm.
That's the thing here. So get moving, get out there, get moving somehow. I will, after we finish this, I'll get out of this suit that I'm wearing, and I'll go do my 7 miles. Okay, that's what I will do. I do
Mhm.
that not every day, 4 times a week, and then I mix it up. Right?
Just
What?
gotta say a quick bye.
Oh,
She dropped an
Oh,
excellent
oh, thank
conversation.
you, Brielle. Thank you. Yeah, have a great day. So do something physically with that 8 hours, right? The
Yeah.
other eight, have your leisure, okay, and you can
Mhm.
define leisure however you want. You can meditate, and I'm not big on meditation. It's something I need to learn more how to do. But do, but disperse this 8, and
Mhm.
then live your life in that 8, right? Because you're working for the other 8, right?
Mhm.
Either on yourself, and if you don't have a job, you're working on developing yourself. So that
Mhm.
8 hours, pretty much, and then some days it's going to be 6 hours plus,
Mhm.
10 hours, whatever, and that type of thing. So that's kind of how I do it. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but it's
Well, I did
simple.
something
Yeah.
very similar. First off, I did it on a laminate piece of paper, so I just like so I could
Yeah.
draw and change it as I wanted. Then I got into Google Calendar and I've done it there. I've just continued, as it were. But I first off just blocked in like my appointments. So I went, okay, 8 till 9, that's
Hmm.
that one, because my time isn't a 9 till 5 office job. My time is I have that session, I have that session, so I have these times. Then I extended and added in my commutes to make sure they were gone. One question that does come up was, is your commute work time or leisure time? And I went,
That's one of those gray areas, right? So
yeah,
use it for personal development. If you Unless you're driving a car, then don't look at your phone, right? But you
yeah.
can listen to something. You can listen to something, but don't listen to the news, but listen to music.
Well, this was where I sort of went, okay, how much time am I spending? At one point,
Mm.
I was, pre-COVID, I was earning really good money. But I actually looked back and I actually kind of did it for then. I was like, okay, I've got a lot of work time, but I've also got this huge amount of travel, this huge hanging around time that is basically not cost effective. So I'm actually exhausted. So if I kept going at this for 5 years, I would make some really good money. I would have done, but I would have been exhausted.
Yeah.
When I got to my holiday, I would have really wanted them. So actually doing this, I did it exactly kind of like you said, breaking up, going, okay, that's my sleep. And in fact, even now, my sleep is in my Google Calendar. So I actually have sleep booked out. I am
Yep.
not doing appointments that time. If I do,
Mhm.
you're very privileged. That is my
Yep.
off time.
Yeah,
Then I
that's
book in my
great.
appointments,
Yeah.
all this.
Mm.
I even, because I've been doing some courses, I book in those times. And the other thing as well, I somehow have a the guilty habits. We talk about habits in our time, but making sure I have my lunch break. So even if I'm not, because I
Mhm.
don't do a 9 to 5, booking out my lunch break and making sure I move from this desk. I go and sit at my table and chair. I have my lunch, or I sit on the sofa. If somebody rings me, like someone did on my lunch break today, and I went, I'm not answering. And I resisted that. And I went, no, you can call them in 20 minutes when you finish your lunch. It's a work call. You don't need to answer it.
Yep.
To
It's a
make sure I'm
distraction.
managed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I knew exactly what it was about. It was literally a 2-minute call. It wasn't even a big call. But I went, no, because when it's always going to be a yes. And if you call, when I spoke to Will, this is, I think, a nice thing to sort of point to for us to tie up in, is being a yes person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Right.
I can just answer that. Yes, that won't matter.
Yeah. I mean, these boundaries, you're talking about boundaries, and it's very important to put the guardrails, however you want to put it that way, but guard your time like it's your most valuable asset. And that was, I had obviously a lot of personal assistants over the course of my career, and they would all think it was strange that I wanted to control my calendar. So if somebody wants to meet with me, they need to find out why, and I would then have a discussion with my personal assistant and agree whether or not to accept the meeting, because otherwise you're meeting all the time, and it's not a good way to, as a leader, to necessarily disperse your time. So guard it like it's your most valuable asset.
For those freelancers, because one way I've found to manage this, obviously I use Calendar for my bookings. It's like a Calendly, right? The one thing I like about it is when Calendly cancels, it just crosses through. When you cancel with Calendar, it actually takes out my calendar, so it actually frees the time up. But there's one way of booking it. I book in a free slot. It will only book appointments where I've got this free slot booked into my diary.
Yeah.
So it'll only find set periods of time. Whereas if you do another way, you can pick out anything in your diary that's available. But this will only go in those windows. So I pre-book on repeat slots of time that I go, okay, in that time, if you book in that day, I know I've got an appointment. That's fine. But I know I'm also going to be here. I'm going to be at the computer. I'm going to be 100% present. I'm going to be able to show up. I'm going to be absolutely fully engaged with this. I'm not going to be on my phone and running from A to B. I'm going to give you the 100% of me that you're booking my time for. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Using those tools. And like you were saying, I used to manage myself. The fact that there are these tools out there now that can help us.
There are these tools, and I mean, Apple has a great one called Screen Time, where you can only permit certain apps at certain periods that you can access, and the other time it blacks them out. And that could include phone calls, it could include texts, all of this stuff. So these distractors, you manage the distractions well, you're not going to have a problem with time management. But I would just offer maybe the final piece of advice here is 3 things, right? Plan it. You need to plan it. Liz, you've just described that you spend time planning. I do it as well. I do it the day before, right? And I do it at the end of each week. But you plan it, then you track it, because it's important for us to then take a step back after we go through our calendar to say, well, how did that work out? Do I want to keep spending time? I mean, Liz, you asked me to come on your program again. I'm going to do it, right? Because, I form my opinion, right? Halfway through this as well. But I've been on some programs, and I'm not going to go on them again. That's not demeaning to the other person. I'm just not going to do it because it's not a productive, the topic really wasn't, of big interest. So you plan it, you track it, and then you coach yourself, right? We always talk about coaching other people. Coach yourself. Look at, you learn from these things. You've obviously learned a method that you just described with your calendar, right? So coach yourself. Say, okay, I want to maybe increase the number of meetings because I want to build my business more. So I'm going to give it another hour in Calendly or whatever it is, or an hour less, right? And spend more time on my physical activity, because if you don't have that, so plan, track it, and then coach yourself, right? That coaching element is so important. Sometimes that can be another human helping you with it. Sometimes it should be you coaching yourself, because you've got the
Mhm.
tools to do it, like you said.
And that is a beautiful close about putting the tools in place to manage your time and being effective with your results. So, guys, I hope you found some value. If there is any comments, thoughts, or questions, do throw them in the comments section. Let us know. I said Brett's willing to come on live again, so if we get enough, we might tempt him back onto screen. So do share them. If not, then maybe we could do one and get into the physical side of this, because as you can see, this is such a huge topic. There's actually 3 elements. We've kind of hit onto the mental side. There's all about that emotional element as well, because regardless of whether you want to admit it, the emotional side of giving up work or changing work, getting more time, not having time, is huge. And of course, there's a physical elements as well. So there's other elements. But we want to hear from you. Let us know what you're thinking. Otherwise, Brett, thank you so much, young man. Grateful for your years
My
of
pleasure,
experience.
Liz. Yeah. I love
And
your work. Love what you do to help other people, and that includes me as well. So thank you.
every day. So on that one, here's the end video. I've got this one.